What's the best roaming build for Guild Wars 2 World vs. World right now? This is the question we want to answer today in this tier list. Be sure to watch the whole tier list to not miss out a thing about these takes. As always, special shout out to all my supporters that help me keep the lights on. And now without much further ado, let's jump straight in and start with a big disclaimer. This tier list is my opinion on the matter. Please let me know your takes down in the comments, please be civilized, but I would say this is my subjective take on the matter, which is even more subjective than usual because roaming, in my opinion, is really hard to rate a build or a class specifically because it's really like somewhat challenging because sometimes a build counters another build and some classes favor specific players a bit more than others. So it's really hard to find a really easy objective take on which build is really good, which is not. So please take that all with a bit of a grain of salt. This is just my opinion on the matter. The criteria here are: how good are you in specific in one-on-ones, in outnumbered situations? Can you deal with most classes? Or are you a niche build that is really good at doing one thing but is really bad at doing something else? I think something that is generally good is way higher rated than something that is very niche, even if it's really good in that niche. But I will try to mention everything here, and I also try to mention every single name of those specs because that was one of the criticisms I got in the latest videos. For new players, it's hard to see which kind of icon means which lead spec, so I will try to name it as often as possible. And now let's take a look at the tiers. So we have S tier, which is obviously for strong. S tier builds really good in a lot of situations, most situations even, and you will probably have problems fighting them if you have a lower tier build because they're just really strong. Then we have A tier. A tier is for me a build that is either doing quite good in most situations or is really good in a specific niche or is very annoying, because in roaming there is some kind of annoyance as well. Sometimes builds that you can't kill, that you can't deal with just because they are very annoying is, in my opinion, a build that is also worthwhile putting quite highly, because a lot of opponents just don't want to fight you and you will be successful in either killing them after a while or you will just take fights that you will only want to take and don't engage in ones that you don't want to take. We will get to builds like that in a few minutes, so if you don't understand what I mean by that, you will see that in a bit. Then for B tier, it's just balanced, which means those builds are working, they are worthwhile playing if you are not like going always for the best meta picks, but they are balanced in a way that they are just good enough to be working, but they are not overpowered as strong tier builds or not annoying as A tier builds. So they are okay to be played, but they will have problems fighting, for example, some strong tier builds in some situations, or have problems, for example, in some situations are good in others. So it's generally like, I would say this is the baseline where you want to have your builds, and typically all builds should be in balanced tier. And then you have C tier, which means challenging. They are worse than balanced builds, but they could still work as a roaming build, but they will have more problems than all the other higher tiers. So you can win in one-on-ones, even in outnumbered situations with them, but you will probably not succeed in an equal skill matchup. But that's just my take. And then Don't is like the most subjective tier, where I would say this is just a build that I would say for roaming doesn't really work, or is just like, it's just not good. You will just lose in any matchup, or you will just not have fun playing it, or you have to have such a high skill gap between the opponent and you to win with this build that it's just at this point you want to experiment and you want to have some memes going. But now enough of the tiers, let's start with the first class, and we will this time go alphabetically but in a reverse order. So we will start with Warrior. So Core Warrior, in my opinion, you can play it quite as a tank or as someone that is like playing a Condi build or something like that. I think Core Warrior might not be the best pick. I personally think Core Warrior is probably in B tier. It's a decent pick. Maybe you could make the argument for putting it annoying if you play some tank build, but I think it's a balanced build. It's decent enough, but it's not the best one. We will get to other builds and maybe we will adjust it later, but personally I think Core Warrior seems to be balanced enough for me. Then we have Bladeson. I think Bladeson for roaming, what can I say? I think there is some rival memes Bladeson build going around right now. I personally don't really like that gameplay of it, and I think it's not that strong. I personally would put it in challenging Bladeson. I don't see Bladeson being the craziest like roamer, and it's not that crazy in terms of damage output, but maybe you can make it work and you could say it's balanced. That's for me personally, I don't see Bladesons that often, and when I see one, I just kill them. They are not that good and I don't like to play it. It's just really weak. I personally don't see it. I think it's for challenging or for some kind of memes, but maybe someone has a crazy build and it's like you could put it in annoying or be balanced here. I personally think it's not good. I would not recommend it. Then we have Berserker. I think Berserker goes definitely in A tier for me. Berserker is a build you can play a Condi Berserker, and it's surprisingly good. It is not good in all situations. Especially if the opponent has good Condi cleanse, you will deal no damage and will not do anything. But if you fight the correct opponents and if you play it correctly and play it safe, I think it's a really good build. It is not strong because it has some counters and it's just not the best build, especially if the opponent dodges your Skull Grinder, for example, or you could also play a Power Berserker, but I don't see that happening. So I think it's for me an A tier build. Has counters but works in a lot of situations. And then we have Spellbreaker. I think Spellbreaker is similar to Berserker. I think it's an A tier build. I wouldn't say it's annoying. It's decent in like playing one-on-ones. Maybe you have to put it in balance, because I would say in a lot of situations it's just not as good as Berserker, especially in outnumbered situations. It's a good one-on-one build, a duelist spec. So Spellbreaker I would recommend if you want to duel and stuff. But I think in outnumbered situations, I would actually say Berserker is better, maybe even Core Warrior. So I think it's balanced for me. It's a decent pick, but it's not crazy good. Next up, we have Thief. So Core Thief, in my opinion, goes directly into annoying. It is not a very good pick, but it's definitely annoying, and you can actually win a lot of situations because you have crazy burst in conditions, and you can be really annoying with the stealth engage and stuff like that. So if you play it correctly and play a really like decent build, the crazy cook here, that works actually surprisingly well. And the same actually goes, for example, for Daredevil. You can play Daredevil very well if you play it correctly. It's a really good build. I would say it's still not S tier because you struggle in outnumbered situations. You have to take fights that you know you can win. You want to engage and disengage, and I think because of this playstyle, it's annoying. And A tier for me. And then we have Deadeye. I think Deadeye goes also in annoying tier, because it's again the same thing. You can shoot from range, you can stealth a lot. If you play it correctly, it's a really good build in a one-on-one. In outnumbered situations, I think it's way harder to perform on. That's why it's an A tier. I think the similar go for Daredevil and Deadeye. I think they are both similar. I think Core Thief is worse than those two, don't get me wrong. I don't really rate from left to right. I just try to put it somewhere close together. I think it's really hard in some situations. Those builds are definitely better than Core Thief for sure. I think those are annoying for me, not yet S tier. And then we have Spectre. I think Spectre is really hard to rate. Spectre is a build that I would say is not annoying as Daredevil and Deadeye, but Spectre, in my opinion, is a build that can perform really well if you play it correctly. But I'm not sure if it's yet in S tier, because it still struggles a little bit in some situations if the enemy has too much Condi cleanse, or if you just fight an outnumbered situation and get CC locked or something like that. I personally think Spectre is for me again an A tier build. So you can see Thief is actually just a really good roamer. It is not S tier with any build in my opinion, but it works decently well in most situations. It doesn't matter which elite spec you're playing, even the core class is in my opinion decently enough. So that's just my take. Thief, all of them A tier. Now let's talk about Revenant. So Core Revenant, I made actually a video quite recently about Core Revenant, where I showcased that you can play Core Revenant as a roamer. I would say it's not a build that I would recommend to players, but I think it's a challenging build. You can make it work. It is just worse than others, but it's not don't tier. Actually, surprisingly enough, it's not don't tier. So then we have Vindicator. I think Vindicator is actually a really good roaming build. I think it got nerfed in PvP quite a bit, but in roaming, it's still a really good build. If you play it correctly, it's not easy to play, but if you play Vindicator correctly and play it like well, it's surprisingly good. I would say that's the first S tier build for me. It performs really well if you know what you're doing. It's not an easy build to learn, I would say, but if you can play it, it's actually surprisingly good. I think it's not the highest of S tier, but it's a decent S tier pick. Then let's go to Renegade. I think Renegade for roaming, I don't see it, to be honest, to be a crazy good roamer. It's a decent roamer. It can be annoying because of all the spirits and the area denial, but in PvP it's way stronger because of putting a lot of spirits on point and you can't contest the node. In World vs. World you can't do that really because you can just go somewhere else, you know, you don't have to fight on a specific spot. That's why the map is so big and you can just avoid the spirits. So I think because of that, in my opinion, it goes into balanced tier. It's a decent build to play as a roamer. I think it just gets overshadowed by its other elite specs for Revenant. So I think Renegade decent, balanced, but not crazy good. And then we have Herald. Herald is interesting because Herald is somewhere in the middle between Vindicator and Renegade, in my opinion, I think it's a decent build. It's probably one of the best A tier builds, I would say, because you can play it as a power or condi build. It's very strong. I think it is not yet S tier for me because you can, if you play the power build, you can just get one shot because you're really squishy. If you play the condi build, you might struggle a bit with some damage, especially if the enemy team has a lot of like cleanses. If you play it's like some kind of in outnumbered situations, sometimes it can be really good. But if the enemy team has enough cleanses or even a support with them in the outnumbered situation, you do no damage and you will just die. So I think this is a little bit more gimmicky when you want to play this build, but I think power and condi can work very well. That's why it's an A tier. I think highest of A tier. You could make the argument to put it in S tier as well, but I think it's deserving a spot Herald in A tier, I would say. Then let's talk about Ranger. So I think Core Ranger is an interesting one. I think personally Core Ranger, that might be a hot take, but I would say Core Ranger, just don't do it. I think Core Ranger, you can make it work, it's okay, but I think the problem is for me that it is so much worse than the elite specs. So if you have access to the elite specs, it's stone tier. If you just have a core game, then you could put it in challenging because it's a build that can work. But I really think Core Ranger for me is like lowest of C tier. It's worse than Core Revenant and Bladestone for sure, so I would put it in D tier for just don't play it. You will just, in a similar skill matchup, you will lose against almost any other spec. So I would not recommend playing Core Ranger. On the other half, we have Untamed. I think Untamed is a really strong roamer. I think Untamed, it's hard to say. I think in one-on-ones it's S tier, and in a lot of Untamed situations, I think it can also work in outnumbered situations and stuff. Sometimes it can be a bit annoying. It's not the easiest build. I would put Untamed in strong tier. Yeah, I think so. It might not be the best of S tier, but it's definitely a really good roamer. Then we have Druid. Druid easily goes in annoying. I think Druid is, I would say, borderline strong, but I think it's more annoying than it is strong because it's really tanky. It has a lot of annoying CC and just immobilize and condition application. I don't like fighting Druids ever, and if you play against a good Druid, you will never win a one-on-one, and if they are like decent enough, they can even win outnumbered situations over a long time. So they are some kind of bunker build. You can also play power. It's just CC heavy. I don't personally like to play this kind of playstyle, but if you fight against it, you see how good that one can be. So I think definitely annoying tier. Definitely like a good pick for someone that enjoys annoying the enemy until they give up. So that's how you play Druid, I guess. And then you have Soul Beast. Soul Beast is interesting because Soul Beast you can play power or condi. I think both of them are decent. I think the power variant is more of a meme thing because you can one-shot people. I think it's not the thing that is like I would recommend to play in outnumbered situations to just die, typically, if you can't one-shot multiple people at once. I think Soul Beast, in my opinion, I would rather play condi. I think the condi Soul Beast is a decent pick. It's very good in one-on-ones. It is surprisingly good in outnumbered situations as well if you can land your damage, but I would say highest of A tier, if not S tier. I think it gets a little bit overshadowed, in my opinion, by Untamed because you can also play a Condi Untamed, which is really, really strong. I think Condi Untamed is actually the best one that we have in this tier list right now, but that's why I would say Soul Beast highest of A tier because you have a little bit of a better spec with Untamed in S tier already. Now let's talk about Necromancer. So Core Necromancer, I would say for me is balanced tier, because it works, it's decent, it's better than, in my opinion, the challenging tier. It's very slow, but you have good damage, you have decent sustain, or more defenses because of your double life pool. But I think it works. It's not for everyone, it's a little bit of a slow play style, but you have a lot of condition application and just really annoying with your fear uptime and stuff like that. So I think it's a balanced build, it works, especially in one-on-ones it can be quite good, but in outnumbered situations, I think because of your slowness, I think it's not that crazy good. That's why I would put it here. And with Harbinger, I mean, what can I say? One of the best builds, either Power or Condi Harbinger, both of them amazing. You can even play a Minstrel Harbinger if you really wanted to. S tier. Easy S tier build. Really, really strong in roaming. Even though you don't have a second life pool, you have so much sustain, healing. You have really, really good lifesteal if you play the Power version. You have good corrupt uptime. It's just a really, really safe pick for most situations. It might not be the best if you play 1v5 because you are just a little bit more squishy than other Celestial builds or power builds, but if you play it correctly, you have crazy good sustain and can actually outplay those as well. So I would say easy S tier for me. Then we have Scourge. Scourge is a hard one to rate because I think Scourge, if you're playing solo, it is not that good, but if you play in a group, it can actually be decent. I would say Scourge as a roamer goes for me in challenging tier. It could be in balance as well. I think you could make an argument because you can play some annoying tanky Scourge and just just annoy your enemy team down, and it could even go in A tier for that, but I think it's not a good roamer. It's too slow, it doesn't have too much defensive, it's just a bunker that doesn't provide that much damage, and it's also not the... I think Core Necromancer is just better, that's why I would put Scourge in C tier and Core Necromancer in B tier. Then we have Reaper. Reaper is weird because Reaper you can play Power Reaper, which is surprisingly decent, or you can play Condi Reaper, which is also surprisingly decent. Both of them are like okay. I think they will not get to Harbinger strength yet, so that's why I would put it in A tier. They are not annoying to fight in my opinion. I think they are quite tanky, but they also have good damage, but if you outplay them, they are actually decently killable. I think for me that's a fair A tier, not annoying tier, just A for being decent but not strong tier yet. Before I go to Mesmer, I want to mention if you like this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. But now let's talk about Mesmer. So Core Mesmer I would say is like not don't tier because you can actually make some burst builds, you can make some Condi builds as well. I think it's for me challenging tier. I know that other content creators actually play this build. I personally think it's overshadowed by its other elite specs, but it can work. It's not don't tier in my opinion. It works and can be okay, especially in some situations where you can outplay the opponents. I think typically I would not go for it because there are the other elite specs. So let's talk about Virtuoso next. Virtuoso in my opinion is a spec that you can play Celestial, Power, Condi, whatever you want. All of them work. I think because of the inherent defenses that they have in the kit, I think it's a decent spec and I would put it in annoying because it's really annoying if they have multiple defenses like Distortion, like the invulnerability, utility skill. There are multiple things that make them quite tanky and they can have surprising bursts, so I think they are in A tier and annoying tier because they're actually surprisingly good. I think they are not yet in S tier just because we have better builds in S tier, but that's just my take. Then we have Chronomancer. I think Chronomancer is interesting because I think you can play a power Chronomancer, which in my opinion is not that good. I would not play that, it's too squishy, but it has crazy good burst if you can pull it off. I think you would more likely play a Celestial or Condi build, and then it's actually a surprisingly good build. I would say it's an A tier build, not annoying, A tier because you can actually burst them with a lot of confusion and stuff. I personally like to play this build, it's really strong, but it struggles in some situations, especially in outnumbered situations, I would say, because they might have Condi cleanses for each other, and then you can't upkeep your confusion and they will not die and you will die after a while. So I think it's for me A tier because it's not very strong in all situations, but in 1-on-1 surprisingly good, for example. So I would say borderline S tier together with those two. And then we have Mirage. Mirage is very interesting again because you can play it Celestial, Power, Condi, everything works. Mirage is just in a really good spot right now. It is not the easiest class to play. I think it goes very similar to Chronomancer, very close together because both of them, Mirage and Chronomancer, are like a little bit situation dependent if you can pull it off. For example, a Spear Power Mirage can really burst down a target, multiple targets even, but if they fight back and survive the burst, you might be struggling again. So I think it's not S tier yet in my opinion, but quite close. So those are definitely like a really high A tier for me, those 4 specs. Next, let's talk about Guardian. I think Core Guardian, yeah, I think you can play it. I think it's either B tier or C tier. I think Core Guardian for me is like, let's put it in low B tier. You could play some Meditation Guardian or Burn Guardian as well. It could work. I think it's not the best build. It gets a little bit like, it's a little bit outdated, but it's okay. It's not too bad. And what can I say? We have Firebrand. I think Firebrand in a solo scenario is not that good. I think I would put it in balanced. If you play with a group, it's actually good because you have some support and some utility in the kit, and you could put it in A tier. I personally would say in most situations I would put it in B tier for balance. You could play it, it's okay. It's not the best build though. I think it's like low B tier for me. And then we have Dragon Hunter. I think Dragon Hunter is a decent roamer. It is not the best spec for roaming. I think Dragon Hunter has the issue that you have to play it power and you play it either full bunker or you play it full DPS, and both versions are not crazy good in playing in a roaming scenario because the traps are not really like, they are like you put them down and the enemy might just go into a different spot and never walk into your traps. So I think it's a little bit like not perfect for that. I think because of that it's in balanced tier. You can make it work. It is really good at, for example, clearing camps and stuff, but I think it's not the best roaming build. Maybe you could make the argument if you want to kill and you fight against the Dragon Hunter, it can be annoying to kill them if they bunker it down, but I would say for me it's more imbalanced here. I think Willbender is the first one that I would say goes into annoying from Guardian because it's surprisingly mobile, it has really good burst damage. It is not the best in outnumbered situations, that's why it's not an S tier. It's more annoying then it is like really good. I like to play it because it's fun. It's a skill build where you can just burst down opponents. You can also win outnumbers and one-on-ones, but it is not like crazy good. It's outclassed by S tier builds in my opinion, but it is definitely a high A tier build for me. I would say if you fight a good opponent, you will not win if they are playing an S tier build or even some other A tier build, but if you fight bad opponents, it's one of the best specs because you can actually just kill them very fast and just outplay them with your damage potential. Then we have Engineer. Engineer, Core Engineer, this I would say goes into annoying or A tier in my opinion, because you can easily play a build that is really annoying and you can actually kill opponents with it. Maybe in balance, but I think in low annoying, that's where I put Core Engineer. And the same actually goes for Holosmith. I think Holosmith easily secret build, I don't want to name it here, but you can easily put it in A tier because of its strength and annoyingness. So I think easy A tier for that. Holosmith just surprisingly good and really, really nice spec for roaming for the most part. It has some like weaknesses. Sometimes the damage output cannot be that crazy in outnumbered situations because you have to focus on surviving. Sometimes they're a little bit struggling, and I would say it's a really good A tier build. And then we have Mechanist. I think Mechanist is like, for me, I think it's in C tier. I don't like to roam as a Mechanist, but some people I know, they say it's decent. I would put it in the lowest for B tier because it's okay, you can make it work. I don't like to roam with the pet. The pet is just, in my opinion, stupid and not that good. I personally don't like it. That's just my personal bias there. I think Mechanist for competitive modes is not that good. I wouldn't recommend it, but I can see why it's a build that you could make work and it shouldn't go into don't tier. And then we have Scrapper. I think Scrapper, in my opinion, is a build that works surprisingly well because you have barrier, you have super speed, and can be really annoying to deal with it. That's why I put it in annoying tier. I think Holosmith for Aroma is a little bit better personally, but I think both of them work very well if you play it correctly. I think that's like really, really nice for people that enjoy Engineer, and it's a very skill-based class. So Engineer with Holosmith and Scrapper is quite skill-based. You can make it work. If you are not that good, I think it falls off into B tier, but if you know what you're doing, it's actually A, maybe even S tier sometimes in some situations. But it's not universally good as like the other S tier builds that I would say. And last but not least, we have Elementalist. I think Elementalist, we have Core Elementalist. I would not play Core Elementalist. I think that's the second down tier. I personally think it's just not that good. You know, the traits don't really work that well together. And the problem is that Core Elementalist is like, yes, you could play some Core Fresh Air build, you could play Core Dagger, but it's just not that good, you know? I think it's just overshadowed by its other elite specs. So again, I think just like Ranger and those two, I think you could put them in challenging and you could make them work. I think that's a fair take to say, nothing works, nothing doesn't work for roaming. But I think they are definitely a bit lower than C tier builds in my opinion. That's just my take. And now talk about Weaver. I think Weaver you can play as a Fire Weaver, so that does a lot of burning damage and plays Condi builds, or you play as a Fresh Air Weaver. I think those two work, or you could also go for some kind of Lightning Rod Weaver. All of them work. I think for me that is a high balance tier. I think it's not yet A tier because it has some weaknesses in terms of stability uptime, and you can easily get just denied by a lot of CC. And sometimes the Condi class can be a little bit challenging as well, especially on Fresh Air Weaver. If you play a Fresh Air Weaver well, I think it goes into A tier. And that's why I put it in low A tier, because it actually has the potential to outplay opponents, because you actually are quite decent. You have some super speed and stuff. I actually like that, but it's low A tier, not as good as the high A tier stuff. Then we have Tempest. I think Tempest is for me a build that you can easily put into A tier. It is not yet S tier in my opinion, because it's just a little bit less like focused on damage. You can actually survive very well on a build. You have multiple roles to play it. I personally think that the damage is too low to put it in S tier, especially if you're in outnumbered situations. You will just not kill the enemies typically because they are just not receiving enough damage from you. But I know some people like it, so you could make an argument for putting it in A tier, in S tier. I personally like to put it in high A tier. Then we have Catalyst. I think Catalyst is better than Tempest, and that's why I would put it in S strong tier. It is just very flexible. It might not be the most fun spec for a lot of people, but it's just really, really strong in terms of what it can provide. And just very, very versatile. That's why I would leave it in S tier. Catalyst, really, really good roamer. And I think that's my tier list. I would say we have really good, strong builds. I think we have a really good high A tier build, where a lot of builds are actually in A tier or annoying tier. And you could make the argument for splitting an A and annoying tier. Fair, you could do that, but I personally think it's sometimes annoying your opponent to death is also a viable strategy, and if that works, then you can actually win in a lot of situations, and therefore it's an A tier in my opinion. I think A tier is where most roaming builds are, because they are just working if you play it correctly, if you do it well, and strong builds are just a little bit a little bit better than those in my opinion, because they are shining in almost all situations. And then you have just B and C and even D tier, which you can do and it works, but I think you will be not winning against A or S tier builds in my opinion if you're on the same skill level. So that's my take. Let me know yours in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this tier list. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks again to all my supporters, and I hope to see you all in the next video.